Michael Penix is off to a promising start so far in training camp, and the Falcons fully expect it to carry over into the regular season.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast, almost for 9 years coming up this November here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I appreciate each and every one of you that goes strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this podcast your first listen each and every day. And all you have to do to become an everydayer is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today we are joined by Jarvis Davis a little earlier in the week here on Locked On Falcons than usually, as we wrap up the week, usually with Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta. But we want to get Jarvis's brain picked. He can't sit on his thoughts about James Pierce and Jaylen Walker for another 3 or 4 days. He wants to get them off now here on the podcast. But we'll pick Jarvis's brain on the first phase of sort of training camp, having been to 2 of the first 3 practices. And of course, Jarvis is, this is Christmas for Jarvis because pads go on Tuesday. And so we'll get Jarvis's thoughts on what he wants to see in that first padded practice, and then maybe we'll have Jarvis on after to see what he actually winds up seeing. But Jarvis, my friend, welcome back to Locked On Falcons.
Good to be here, man. I feel like I haven't seen you in forever, You know what I'm saying? So it's good to see your face, man. I'm happy to be here, my brother.
Yes. Go check us out on the Atlanta Football Party over at Locked On Sports Atlanta, as well as Locked On Falcons. But Jarvis, I was talking about this yesterday with sort of, we're at a point in the summer where when you count all the days since the very beginning of players reporting to training camp on Wednesday last week to when final cuts are kind of made and that phase of the summer is kind of over and everything starts to turn their attention to the actual regular season, getting ready for that week 1 game. We're about midway through the first quarter, if you think of it as a 4-quarter game. And so, I likened it to, there's still a lot of football left to be played when you're midway through the first quarter, but you kind of want to check the score to see who's up or who's down or whatever. And so I bring it to you, Jarvis, sort of at this stage in the game, who's up for you when it comes to what you've seen in 2 out of the 3 practices that you've been able to attend in Falcons training camp?
Michael Penix Jr. Can I say an individual? Because when you think about what he's been able to do with not the pass on, I'm sorry, but just being out there, having a control his offense and just really continue to prove what he can do, potentially do in his first full season as a starter for this team and his second year in his offense, in Zach Robinson's offense. I think, sometimes you forget, because like you said, you go back to the games last year, a three game sample size, and you kind of fast forward to now off season and all this stuff, and you haven't really seen him really mix it up or throw the rock like that. But it's almost kind of like riding the bike. He's just like, oh yeah, I remember how great this looks. Yeah, that deep ball looks amazing. And the deep ball that Darnell Mooney got hurt on or tried to catch, it was a perfect throw. And I was just like, man, it's unfortunate that he ended up getting hurt. But I think the guy that comes to mind when you talk about who's been winning or who won this like first little phase of training camp is it's 9, like settling in, and then the confidence that he speaks with, not only with his play, but there's what's coming out of his mouth. It's just like, oh my God, this dude is just super confident. And you try to figure out why, and you understand the why once he goes onto the field and that ball is snapped. So I think though that's the main thing for me that just really just kind of stood out. I was just like, oh my gosh, man, this dude is back. He's ready. And he's ready to, take this offense to where it needs to be.
Well, Jarvis, I do appreciate you highlighting a skill player, even one as important as Michael Penix Jr., because I know that is not where your heart lies. You know,
Wait a
um,
minute, hold up, dawg. How you gonna try to call me out like that, bro? Like
I,
that's a
I appreciate you though. No, I like it though. I like it. You know, you're expanding your horizons, and again, obviously, because Michael Penix is the quarterback, and because there's a lot of pressure on him and this team to kind of make this work. As you know, we were discussing on the Atlanta football party with the whole Kirk Cousins situation, and it's like everybody in that building kind of needs Michael Penix to work in
yes,
order for us to be like, oh yeah, and then they did that her Kirk Cousins sort of situation, like forgive
100
and
million
forget.
guarantee,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and so it is nice to hear that Michael Penix is getting off to a good start, and what little I've seen from training camp, at least those, we love those 6-second practice clips. They look real good when it comes to Michael Penix airing it out. I'm looking forward to the many more like slow motion shots of tight spirals, floating through the air and dropping in the bucket for some of these various receivers all summer long. So that being said, Jarvis, let's get to what you care about. And the other, it's interesting because for me, one of the two main storylines for this team is the quarterback
Mhm.
this summer and the sort of young defensive players that this team is counting on. And I want to kind of get your thoughts on those guys at this stage, and we'll do that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. I know it's tough trying to beat the Heat this summer, but you can do so by taking it all the way to the ballpark. You don't have to worry about planning, days and hours in advance, because you have Gametime, where they're the place to go for your last minute tickets, because they have the killer last minute deals where you could save up to 60% off. Since the prices on the app drop the closer you get to your starter event, and you don't have to worry about the hassle of scrolling through thousands of seats to find the best deal, because Gametime has their zone deals, which are going to pick the best seats in the section for you, and the panoramic seat views, the lack of hidden fees at checkout, and the Gametime guarantee is going to have your back for cancellation protection and more. So whatever event is near you, whether it's baseball, other sports, comedy, music, theater, Gametime is taking the guesswork out of buying tickets. So download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So, like I said, Jarvis, I feel like some of the main storylines that we're going to be talking about all summer long is how Michael Penix looks, as well as some of these young players. Later, we'll be talking about, hey, preseason games. Should a couple of guys get out there? Just a few. Again, I know Raheem's not going to play anybody of importance, but just a couple of guys. But we'll save that for August when we get to it. But looking at some of the young players, particularly this rookie class, some of the second year players, anything popping to you in the same ways that we're talking about Michael Penix kind of popping in this first phase of training camp?
But the first guy to come to mind is Brayen Trice. Got a chance to get my eyes on him yesterday. On Sunday, excuse me, when it was there on 11/11, of course, and then he was lined up and just sitting there kind of watching like what the get off looks like, pause. And when you think about him coming off an injury, there's always something significant about that first year coming off an injury, right? We saw what it was with Kirk Cousins at his age, right? And then we saw what Adrian Peterson, which is the exact opposite end of the spectrum. Like, oh my gosh, the dude just had what now? 6 months ago? What happened now? So I think that, you know, the hope is, if you're a Falcons fan, the hope is, if you're a front office of this team, is that he'll fall somewhere in the middle, especially with it going into his second year. So I just sitting there watching him and watching how he was able to get off, and he was going up against Caleb McGarry, and it was so quick. He ball snap, boom, got his hands on Caleb, did a little arm over, and he made a tackle for loss. Kind of tagged out the running back, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's nice. And I got a chance to talk to him after practice, and I was kind of asking him about it. Gave him the same scenario. Most of the time people say, hey, second year after the injury is when you really start to see that peak post-injury performance. And he was like, man, I think I'm 100% right now. And based off of what I saw, hey, that's what it looks like. And I think the mental aspect of it, once you get into live games, that's the thing that he's probably going to have to get through or get past. And I think that, we have a second year guy like that. The little promise that we saw, leading up to it, because he was getting a lot of reps with the ones before he got hurt in the preseason. So I think to see him kind of do his thing like that, it was more than one play, but that was just the play that stuck out in my mind. It just makes me kind of smile because I like Brayen Trice coming out. And I think that, he's one of those guys that can add to that already crowded edge room of production. Hey, if he can give you 4 or 5 sacks, man, that is amazing. Give me 6 or 7 from, maybe James Pierce. Give me 6 from Jaylen Walker. Hey, man, you're almost halfway to 40. That's all you need. You need about 40 sacks, man, and you'll figure it out. So I'm putting all type of expectations on. I got 28 points for the offense per game, and then I got 40 sacks coming out of that up front, man. So hey, man, we rolling, baby. Hey, it's football season.
Yeah, it is what it is, man. Like again, that should be the standard, but sure. Unfortunately in Atlanta, like they don't always live up to the standard. But yeah, I think it's good that you point out Brayen Trice because we haven't spent that much time here, or I say we, in myself and my ego. But I haven't spent that much time here on this podcast talking about Brayen Trice because for a lot of reasons, I wasn't as high on Brayen Trice as maybe you and other people were when the Falcons drafted him. I saw him more as kind of more of a role player even before the injury. And then with all the additions that the Falcons have made and the growth that we saw from Arnold Ebiketie and others last year, it felt like to me he had the potential to kind of be buried on this depth chart. So it is good to hear that, he's going out there and showing, hey, don't forget about me as well. But when we talk about some of those other guys, not to skip past it, but when we talk about some of those other guys that have, maybe a little bit more pop when it comes to this pass rush, like James Pierce and Jaylen Walker, what for you are kind of the early returns on those two guys that are, fair or unfair, kind of being billed to be the saviors, or at least the long-term saviors, maybe not the immediate saviors, but the long-term saviors of this non-existent Falcons pass rush?
When I think about Jaylen Walker, he was pop first day one. It was one particular play where he was lined up over the guard, and soon that ball snapped, swim move, boop, up, tap the quarterback, oop, yeah, oh yeah, you made a completion? No, that's a sack, sir. Come on back, bring it on back. So yeah, it was instant, man. He's the type of guy that I watch, man. Going back all the way back to when he was at Georgia. Covering those games and doing post-game shows for those guys, it was so consistent. It was a beautiful thing to watch when he was on because, Georgia wanted to kind of put him on display that he can be a stack linebacker and all this stuff. I was like, hey, man, look, I said it from when I first started doing those shows. I was just like, man, this dude gonna make his money coming off the edge. I know he's not ideal from a size standpoint, 6 feet, probably about 240. Yeah, that's not, if you doggone looking for a prototype of an edge rusher and what that looks like, it's not Jaylen Walker. I'm sorry, it's just not it. But when you're talking about a gamer, a guy who gets on the field and he gets it done, and he has a son that was drafted by the New Orleans Saints. You know what I'm saying? Like, he made him his son. The tackle out of Texas, Kelvin Banks. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but yeah, when you think about it from that aspect of, like, as long as the production is there, and long as this guy consistently gets wins, when he line up in that 2-point stance, getting ready to come off the edge, like I'm all with it, man, because you know it's interesting that the Falcons have come to the point and said they came out and said, hey, this guy's gonna start at the edge. Not necessarily be a starter, but like we're gonna have him at the edge. Like we're not gonna throw too much at him. Like we're gonna pretty much keep it simple, and that seems to be a reoccurring thing with Jeff Ulbrich in his first year in his defense. So, and I actually love that, and kind of mentioned this on the football party too on Monday. A lot of times you don't want to put too much on a guy, especially a rookie, regardless of where you think he is. Kirk Cousins was even talking about how when he talks to Jaylen Walker, it's almost like he's a 10-year. He sounds like a 10-year vet because the guy just been there. Because when his background is coming from his dad was head coach and all that stuff, so he kind of truly understands the game from a holistic perspective. So for me, I find it really interesting that he was doing that first day. Or I'm not surprised. Let me say that. I wasn't surprised that he was standing out day one. He just out there flying around and doing his thing. But and Jeffy Ulbrich even talked about from an injury standpoint, he was just they sat him out, and everything like that. It was like, hey, yeah, it's probably because I made a joke. I was like, it's probably because they want to be able to practice. Because when that dude out there, he got there causing havoc, man. He gonna cause some problems. But seriously though, it seemed like Jeff Ulbrich didn't make that big of a deal when he was asked about it, because I was in there, and he said, hey, they just working on some things with his body and kind of just moved on. So I'm not too concerned about that. But Mr. Pierce. Whoa, Mr. Pierce, he ticked a lot of people off on Sunday, and yeah, man, that was very interesting. Matthew Bergeron was very real in how he felt about Mr. Pierce. I know people were asking me about what he said, and I was like, I'm not gonna say exactly what he said, but the man let James Pierce know how he felt about him. And I think that, and for you all to kind of just keep it in perspective, no one is going to get upset at a person they consistently beat. I'm just saying. If I'm consistently handling you every time I go up against you, or every time you go up against the guy lined up next to me, no, I ain't got no reason to get mad at you. Keep moving, So it's very interesting that James Pierce was involved in several dust-ups. I'm not going to call them fights because they didn't throw no hands or anything like that. I'll say this, though. You can tell Pierce has a little experience because Bergeron came to intercede, let's just use that word, when Pierce was going at it with Ryan Newsel. And then 30 seconds later, Bergeron didn't have his helmet anymore. Pierce snatched that helmet off his head really quickly. And I was just like, oh, okay, y'all keep on trying this, man. Just, y'all might want to just chill, chill out. And when you think, even after the whole fight situation went down, and Ulbrich kind of went into it as well, he still gathered himself, cool. And then he went out and continued to make plays, man. He gave Jake Matthews issues. He gave him an issue, to the point where Jake Matthews was grabbing his face mask, trying to keep him from, get to the quarterback, man. He had himself a day. He had himself a day. Like, take away the fighting and all that stuff, the dust ups, take that out. This man had an excellent day on Sunday. And I'm interested to see if he's able to continue to do that once they put the pads on. And that's why I can't wait.
Yes.
Tuesday.
I know the listeners can't wait to hear more about what you can't wait to see tomorrow, Tuesday, when those first padded practice happens. And so without further ado, let's jump into what you expect and what you want to see in that first padded practice as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Now the fantasy football is back, whether it's talking trash in the group chat, putting on your GM hat to build your draft board, or finding that hidden gem off the waiver wire. It's time to get back to do the things that we love, and Yahoo Fantasy is going to be there to help provide you the things that you love. My friends from college, we've been using Yahoo Fantasy for our keeper league for 2 decades now. And the reason why we chose Yahoo back then, and the reason why we stay with Yahoo to this day, is it's easy to set up. They have a great mobile app. And of course, the smack talk just hits a little bit different in the message boards. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins on August 4th. Stay tuned and get started by creating or joining a Yahoo Fantasy League today at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. That's yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. And let's make this fantasy football season the best one yet. Well, Jarvis, I imagine when the pads come on, that's really where the big uglies, as they often like to call them, that's their time to shine. Not this 7-on-7 running routes against air type
Pretty
of
stuff.
yeah.
I'll see all that.
This is the time where you can put hands on people in regular practice, but like you can really put hands on people. You can reach out and touch someone in these padded practice. That's the kind of the goal of it, is to simulate putting hands on people. And so I imagine when you're looking forward to Tuesday's practice, you're looking forward to that aspect, and it's really looking at some of the things that you've seen from the Jaylen Walkers and the Brayen Trices and the James Pierces and whoever else is on your radar. Do what you're seeing, is it just as simple as, does it a continuation of what you've seen so far outside of pads, in pads, or are there other specific things that you're really sort of keying on when the pads go on?
For me, it has to be the rotations, because it's been like a doggone NHL type situation, man. When it comes to the substitutions, like you'll see one play, it'll be David Onyemata and Ruka Rororo, and then next thing you know, Rook is out, doggone Brandon Doyle is coming in, and doggone David Onyemata is being subbed out, and you got Zach Harrison, whoever, you know what I'm saying? Just when you think about, and they just feverishly rotating guys. I was like, oh my gosh, man. And I even asked Rob about it. I was like, hey, man, sir, when do you all feel like you're going to get this rotation situation type, set or whatever? Because it can't be that quick. Like, I understand you're trying to get guys reps, but that's why I say, to your point, your petty point, like, they're going to have to play some guys on defense, man. There's no way you're not going to play some of these young guys or some of these guys that are going to be part of the rotation, because you got to let that stuff sorted out. I mean, because I even asked Brayen Trice about the whole competition piece. Like, hey, man, it's a crowded room. What do you feel about the competition? You're like, hey, man, the competition, it is what it is. That's what it is. And I think that, they're going to be those guys are going to be competing for those third and long rows. Now, you could say, hey, man, Jaylen Walker and James Pierce Jr. are first rounders. So, hey, you're going to have to figure it out. But no, there is another guy that's going to a contract on the other side, and on Ebiketie, it can Brayen Trice play to a high enough level to allow them to Drew Dahlman, Arne Ebiketie? Because Arne Ebiketie, like you said, if he gets that double-digit sack piece, he gonna get a check. Somebody gonna come pay him. And are the Falcons confident with what they see in 2025 from Brayen Trice to say, you know what, we appreciate you, man, but hey, we got to move on. So I think it's just too many things that are in play when it comes to rotations, what combination of guys are going to be in there on 3rd and long? What is that first group going to look like? So I think that's the thing I'm be paying attention to the most, because I feel like once you get the pads on, that stuff starts to sort itself out, and you start to get at least a peek into what that first wave of guys is going to look like.
I'm curious to pick your brain on the whole rotation aspect. What do you think is the reasoning behind the constant rotation? Is it just simply getting guys as many reps as they possibly can, or do you feel like there's some other, idea behind it?
I think Ulbrich is trying to get as many reps as possible, because he even talked about, he's like, yeah, we're able to get 1,100 reps in our certain aspect of our defense. I'm like, oh, shoot, that many? And when you think about it from that standpoint, okay, they're trying to get the base part of the defense, what they feel they're going to be in probably about 70% of the time, 65, 70% of the time, get that down. Once you get the base part of the defense down, then you can kind of add different elements to it, but still you're not going to add too much, because you want to be able to master what you're going to be in the majority of the time. So I think it's just a matter of getting guys reps, and reason why I say the defensive guys, you're going to probably see some names that you recognize on defense playing in preseason, because, Ra even said it. He said that, the idea is not to play guys. That's my mantra, right? But like, if we aren't able to get to a point where we feel comfortable with what we've seen from every single player, then that's another conversation we're going to have. So, and I feel like that's going to happen up front on the defense side of the football. I feel like it has to happen, because it's just so many guys that you need to see what their roles will be in this defense in 2025.
Okay. Quick clarity. When you say base, do you mean like base nickel, or are you just talking about the core identity of the Falcons defense?
I'm just talking about the core identity of that defense, because I feel like for me, it's too early to say what that is.
Okay.
I ask questions to the side, just to get, because I never want to be that guy to sit up here and say, oh yeah, they're going to be doing this. I ask the expert, I know what I see. You know what I'm saying?
I'm that guy. I'm the guy that they're going to do this. When I heard that they were starting out in 3-4, I was like, 3-4, guys, we're doing 3-4.
Yeah, I got a little nugget on that. So Ulbrich did tell me that they will do some of that 3-4, but it definitely won't be like it was last year. Okay. It'll be far and away from what they did last year. You'll see some of it every now and then, but for the most part, they're gonna kind of tend to move away from that. So so there you go.
That was my suspicion, because going back and watching the Jets film, which I didn't really get into until we got to July, just because I took my sweet time getting through those day 3 draft picks back in June. Mm-hmm. And like, when Ulbrich talked about being multiple and looking at what the Jets did, it was like, yeah, they're multiple, but it's like 90% of the time they're like 4-3, and then like 10% of the time they're doing other stuff. And it's like, technically you're multiple because you're doing other stuff with that 10%. Right. So it's not just one thing, but and then when you look at the roster moves and not really going out there and adding sort of the classic 3-4 nose tackle this offseason, I'm just like, and then when you talk about like Zach Harrison moving out the edge, it's like, why would you move Zach Harrison out the edge if you're just going to keep running a 3-4? So to me, all the context clues suggested that the Falcons were going to move away from that. So I thought it was interesting that they came out doing that at the start of a training camp. Maybe it just as a way to sort of ease into the new stuff. I appreciate you, Jarvis, for coming on here at the end of July and sharing your thoughts on the first few days of training camp, and we will continue to see what this Falcon team can do, and hopefully we'll get you back on tomorrow. That you've talked about what you want to see with the pads go on Tuesday. We'll actually get you to talk about what you actually see with the pads going on Tuesday. And of course, continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen if you want to check that out. And of course, check out all the great content across the Locked On Podcast Network, including Locked On Bets, who are not only going to give you NFL futures, but those MLB locks all day long. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.